Great. So I think I'm seeing a big audience here, and as I just mentioned, I want to keep this session very, very interactive. Use the chat box to type in your questions. In course of presentation, definitely I would like to address these questions for everyone's benefit. If I'm not able to answer your question in the interest of time, I will definitely reach out to you, or you can reach out to me, and we can take that offline. So great. Today's session, as the topic suggests, is Agile Value Proposition. A little bit about myself. My name is Shashis Singh, and I've been doing portfolio program and project management for the last 15 years. In 2008 is when I got my Agile training and got certification, and have been Agile practitioner since then. Have been involved as a Scrum Master, as a product owner, have evolved into an Agile coaching role, and also did strategic transformation, Agile strategic transformation for a couple of big companies, one of the company being in Chicago, Nokia here. We rolled out Agile for 3 continents across 7 verticals. We developed around 63 high-performing teams. So I have seen most of it, a lot of patterns, a lot of anti-patterns in Agile. The goal is very, very clear. Everyone wants to achieve agility in a fast-paced and in a fast-changing business environment. But not everyone has the privilege or fortunate to have the right company or the right coaches to guide them through this transformation. So let's talk about a little about that's about myself. So I have my certification, as you can see. I'm a PMP certified, so I know the PMI, the heavy process, the bottlenecks in those process. I'm a certified Scrum Master, certified Scrum Professional. I have an ACP certification from the PMI. This is highly valued today because PMI is a global brand, and I also have an EMBA from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Good. So to get started, the trend. So the first trend I would like to share with you is this is based on the research and interviews done with the CIOs, especially on the technology side. They predict that 80% of the projects will be done using Agile by 2018. Well, that's a trend. We are seeing an increase in this trend. We are seeing more and more companies across industry coming on board the Agile movement. Earlier, we only saw the tech companies adopting Agile, but I'm seeing a lot of companies in the insurance industry, financial industry, healthcare industry, highly regulated and highly bureaucratic, highly set in the old ways of doing things, embracing Agile. And we are working with several such companies in the Chicago area. And even government is embarking on Agile. A lot of projects on defense is being done using Agile. City of Chicago, for the RFP, request for proposal, they ask people to submit their projects, and the project management methodology is Agile. They want increased visibility. Okay. So what does this mean to us? Of course, it means that are we ready, right? But let me start off with a question to the audience here. Think back to what you would consider your worst project ever. You know, I'm sure you must be having a mixed bag, a lot of successful projects. But think about the worst project that you have, and I want you to think about 3 things. What made it so bad, right? What was the one thing that you would have improved or you would have changed to bring about the most positive impact, or to make it better? What is one thing that you could have changed? That gee, if the requirement was realistic, or if the team was empowered, or we had got executive support, or the project priority was not changed, whatever it is, I'd like to hear from you. Or you can type in the chat box. Think back to your worst project. What made it so bad? And what is one thing that you could have done to make it better? Anyone? Feel free to unmute and talk as well. Poor requirements collected, causing us to go back to recollect. That's great. I think Audrey, for every 10 projects that gets started, 9 gets restarted. That's a study. Because you're trying to collect all the requirements up front, but it's not able to fix it, but it is very difficult to fix the scope of the project up front, right? You cannot predict what the customer is looking for after a year or after 6 months, so it's very difficult to hold the scope, and therefore a lot of projects gets restarted because the scope has changed so much or so substantially. Good. Anything else? Okay. Okay, so there are a lot of things that goes wrong in the projects. First of all, we try to gather. Spend 6 months collecting the scope of the project. And then the requirements change, and when the requirements change, your architecture change, or you try to hold the scope of the project, so you say no to your customer. Your customer goes somewhere else. As a result, you lose your customer, you lose your revenue. So there are a lot of things gets impacted because of the effort to collect all the requirements upfront. In Agile, we collect small requirements. Try to see what you can see, maybe next 3 months, maybe next 2 months. Do not try to see next 6 months, because you'll be making a lot of assumptions because you don't know what the customer is looking for. So in Agile, we always deliver in small increments. Right? Okay. Let's look at some of the pains and frustrations with the waterfall model, and I'm assuming it will resonate with you. Lack of business and IT collaboration. Several projects, you have the delivery team from the IT, the business is disengaged, they come up with a high level requirement, shove it down the IT, and then IT has a lot of questions, they don't have a clear understanding of the requirements, requirements are constantly changing, and then the business is not involved. So you can understand the chaos that results out of lack of IT and business collaboration. Right. The second anti-pattern that we see in most of the waterfall projects is inability to act quickly to take advantage of opportunities. Right. So if the customer requirement is changing, right, if they're looking for some new features, and if the team is not adaptable to the new customer requirement, you lose the opportunity. Why? The customer lose the opportunity, and the customer may go somewhere else, right? Or if you're doing a new product development, and if you find that your new product is not resonating with the customer, and if you're not adaptable, you'll keep doing it, and eventually you'll cancel that project. But then if you cancel the project after a long time, you increase your sunk cost. You have lost the opportunity to pursue other competing or promising ideas, right? So inability to take advantage of opportunities. If you remember the Blockbuster story, I'm sure you would have heard that story. Blockbuster knew that the business model is changing. Netflix is promising customers to deliver online on the day that they order through the using online delivery channel, but Blockbuster is still content with the business model that, hey, we will deliver you within 5 miles. You can just drive within 5 miles, and we are there for you. So they were not able to react quickly. The other thing that we look at is unpredictable issues rear ugly head late in the game. My experience, most of the risk on the projects in the waterfall world is found in the last 10% of the project. Too late in the game. So if you're finding those risks so late in the game, it's very difficult to react, right? And therefore you have a lot of chaos, a lot of not brainstorming, but blamestorming towards the end of the project. A project no longer provides business value, and therefore the statistics says around 30% of the projects that we do in US across industry, they get canceled every year. How much money goes down the drain? $80 billion. $80 billion. Now, if only we could cancel this project early, if it is not delivering business value, we could reduce the sunk cost, right? In Agile, what do? You fail early. You deliver in small increments. So if that small increment is not resonating with your customer, you can pursue some other ideas, or you can adapt your idea to better align with the customer needs. Other frustration, misunderstood requirements. If the business is not engaged with the delivery team, when the delivery team has questions, there's a delay. There's a lot of delay. And according to Lean, if we all have some shared understanding of Lean, delay is a waste, right? And then the requirements gets misunderstood requirements gets coded. As a result, in the end, you provide features that the customer is not looking for. Inability to adapt, right? Most of the time in waterfall project, most of the architecture is fixed. We just say one thing to our customer: no, we can't do it, it's too late. Our architecture is fixed, our design is done, right? Even if it is in the best interest of the customer. Unrealistic schedules, of course, we give estimating every time we give an estimate, most likely we miss out on an estimate. Sometimes the project manager gives an estimate to the stakeholders without consulting the team, and those are all unrealistic estimate, right? And we set the team up for failure. We set the project up for failure in the beginning itself, right? In Agile, who gives this estimate? It comes from the team who's doing the work, right? It is bottom up. Difficult code integration. Most of the time you'll see the code is integrated too late in the game. Lack of respect for the process. In Agile, you have a simple process. It's a very, very simple process. But it's not easy. But it's a very, very simple process. Right? Lack of respect for the process. We find it all the time in waterfall. In waterfall, whenever you have some issues, what you try to do is you put more process and more process, right? So it becomes very, very process heavy. Okay, difficult resource allocation. For the functional manager is looking for, I have 5 projects and 1 person with me, and how do I make that person work on 5 different projects? And as we all know, it's we are less productive, but we work on multiple things at the same time. Bad projects are not cancelled. We see typically in a portfolio of a company, we find on an average, when we look at the portfolio of companies across industry, around 25% of the projects, they are done, but they're not going to deliver any business value to the customer. But they are on. Why? Because there's a fear culture in the company. There's a culture where if you show your risk, if you make the risk very clear, it is not taken well. So it depends on what kind of culture we have. Managed governance policy we talked about. We solve problem by bringing more governance and more processes. Metrics in waterfall projects, most of the time we use metrics that doesn't add value, right? I worked with a VP of quality who had a metric: the more defects you open, the more you get rewarded. So there was not a meaningful metric, so you have to be very careful you get what you measure. Symptoms of a root cause and monolithic release. The biggest challenge we have in waterfall projects is code is integrated too late in the game. When you do the integration too late in the game, you open the Pandora box too late. All the defects show up at the same time, and then you put more testers. Then the project gets delayed, and the customer is frustrated. The stakeholders are unhappy, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's widely known, and I'm assuming most of us will agree, it is not the technical issues that kill projects, it's the people who kill projects. So when you look at Agile is about 2 things. Number 1, it is about people. It's about people, especially in today's market. If you're running the business for today, that means you have existing product and application, existing customers, and you're making money. But the challenge is to build a business for tomorrow, and the tomorrow is so uncertain, right? So for uncertain projects, for uncertain ideas, for uncertain customers, uncertain markets, Agile becomes very handy, because what you do is you deliver in small increments. So even if you fail early. When you fail early, you reduce your sunk cost, and it all depends on how empowered the team is. We bank on the people, and we bank on honesty, right? Okay, let's look at this. I think probably I gave this statistics. If you look at, we do typically 175,000 projects every year, and at the cost of $250 billion, right? And this is what you see here: the large, medium, small projects that we do. But the statistics, which is very astounding or shocking, is only 30% of the projects are successful. If the measure of success is cost, schedule, and scope, only 30% of the project make it. And around 50% of the projects are challenged, which means they're bleeding in the schedule, they're bleeding in budget, they're bleeding in the scope, they're bleeding in quality. And the bleeding is not like 10% or 20%, it's like more than 150%. And then if you look at the third category, the cancelled projects, around 30% of the projects get cancelled. So what it means is, if you go to any company, go to the PMO and look at the portfolio, this is how it will look like: 30% successful, 50% challenged, and 30% likely to be cancelled. Right. Another thing, when you deliver, in big increments, in large chunks, this is what you get. This again is a survey done. It's a very standard group survey. Around 20% of the features are used 80% of the times. This is because when you don't engage your customer or end user or business early and continuously, right? You tend to pack your product with underused functionality. Okay. So canceled projects we talked about is around $80 billion. For every 100 projects that start, there are 90 restarts. There are 94 restarts. More than 90% gets restarted. Why? Because you're trying to define the scope, and the scope changes. When the scope changes substantially, your schedule will change, your cost will change, and then you come back and revisit the scope, right? In Agile, you deliver in small increments, you do frequent demo, and you make a slow and continuous improvement, right? But small and continuous. These three things we do in Agile. When you deliver in small increments, you don't do a big design, you don't have a big requirement, you don't do a big development, you don't do a big release. Everything is small. When you have a small, you fail small. When you fail small, you recover fast. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? I would like this session, as I mentioned, to be very, very interactive. Okay, good. Let's look at the Agile value proposition. So I will just give 30 seconds right now. Think about some of the questions that you have so far. Bring some experience from your project that you have been doing in your company based on the environment that you have. I'd be happy to answer those questions before I go over to the next section. Anyone? RJ, you have a good point here. Technology modernization, creating a roadblocks as we were the first to use the new process and applications. So this is a very strategic decision, right? Whenever you are the first to cross the minefield, you have to take all the risk of crossing the minefield. And this is the strategy. You want to be the first mover in the market, right? And the risk comes with it. And for this kind of projects, Agile works very well because you're iterating. First of all, you find a customer for whom you are developing a solution, and then you take that solution very, very frequently to the customer, right? Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a lot of myths around Agile. Agile means, some people say, hey, Agile means no planning. No, not. You got to have a product strategy. You got to have a product strategy. If it is a new market, you got to know who your customer is. Even if it's a small customer, who your customer is. So I will tell you an example of the first phone that we were developing, a smartphone project that I was working on. We had our customer very, very clear. We are going to roll this out to a millennial customer, 27 to 35, in the Southeast Asian market and an emerging market. We had the price point very, very clear. This is the price point we are targeting, and we have to build a phone with a margin which we knew very, very clear. So we had a pilot set of users drawn from those countries. So we had the market segmentation very, very clear, and then we had an initial set of features which we call it a minimal viable product, when we can just launch the phone and then build the next releases based on the feedback. So yes, absolutely, you've got to have a strategy in place, an overall objective in place. In Agile, this is called chartering. So before you start an Agile project, you must do a chartering where you define the vision of the project, the goal of the project. What is the trade-off metrics? What is most important for us? Is it the time which is most important for us, the time to market, or is it the budget which is most important for us, the scope is more important for us? So this is a session, chartering session, where the development team and the business team comes together to define the vision. Yes, the iteration have to be built to known what to deliver in increments. Absolutely, you got to know what you are going to deliver in the first quarter. We call it a minimal viable product. Minimal viable product is when are you going to launch, or what features are you going to build in next 3 months, say for 3 months or 4 months, but a small time window. and you got to plan for that. And that is the planning which we call release planning, where you have 5 or 6 sprints planned, and that will be planned based on the objectives. We'll have a different session on how you break down requirements in Agile. You break down requirements based on objective, high-level objective, and that is broken down into epics. Epics are broken down into features, and the features are broken down into smaller user stories. The work is done at the user story level. Good questions. Good questions. Anyone else? Okay. Okay. So why are more and more companies are doing Agile, right? So I would ask a question. I would definitely encourage you to type in the chat box, right? Let me ask you a question. No matter which company you're working with right now, do you think the competition is getting stronger and stronger? Is it getting stronger or is it getting weaker? Yes, no? You can unmute yourself. We can talk as well. Do you think that our competition is getting more and more intense? Stronger, okay? Good. Yes. How about barrier to entry to your company? So suppose if you're a company, I have no idea which companies you're coming from, but no matter whatever product or services that your company offers, do you think there are more, the barrier to entry to your company is getting lower or higher? Which means if it is low, that means more and more companies can enter your turf, right? More smaller companies can enter your turf. If it is very high, if the barrier is very high, then it becomes very difficult for others to enter your market. So my question is, based on whatever we are seeing today, technology advancement and globalization, do you think the barrier to entry to your company's market, is it getting lower or it's getting higher? You can speak as well. So the barrier to entry. So say, for instance, if I am if I have a product, right, and say if the product is the greeting card, right, and I have this online, I have this my sales portal is online. Do you think more and more people can enter this market of of selling greeting cards using the online channel? Is it easy for companies to enter, or is it difficult for companies to enter that market? If it is difficult, that means the barrier is very high. If it is easier, that means the barrier is very low. Does it help to understand, Raji? Easier, right? So I think what is happening is more and more companies are going to enter your turf and offer more and more competition because the technology has advanced and because of the globalization, right? So if you look at the bargaining power of your customer, do you think it is increasing or is it decreasing with time? The bargaining power of the customers, they are. Now, if you have a monopoly, it will decrease. But then if you have more and more players coming into your market, then the bargaining power of the customers, they're going to increase. They're going to shop for better prices, better quality. Isn't it right? Right? So I think the bargaining power of the customers are increasing with time. And also you'll find, more and more competition. The substitutes are increasing for your product. So if you have a product in the market that was unique at some point of time, but more and more substitute products are entering the market. Even the suppliers to your company, the people who are supplying the raw materials or inputs to your company, their bargaining power is increasing, because initially it will be just you, but down the line, there are many other people, many other companies the suppliers can meet the needs for. So if you look at all this landscape, it is very competitive, it is very fast changing, and we got to be very responsive, right? And that is where agility comes into picture. We got to be very agile. We got to respond very fast to the market changes. Okay, so let's look at some of the value proposition of agile. Number one is, if you look at the ROI, return on investment. On a typical agile project, because you are delivering in smaller increments, because you want to make sure that you launch early to the market, you take your features, your minimal viable product, as early as you can to the market. What you do is you start making money early. For example, if you take the iPhone, it was not perfect. The first release was not at all perfect. There were a lot of basic features that was not there. But the value proposition of the company Apple is, let my customers have some pain or frustrations. But after my first release, I will understand which are the most vital pain and frustration of my customer, and then in my next release I'm going to address that by prioritizing those. So when you roll it out early, you not only make money early, but also you get the advantage of getting the feedback early. So based on that feedback, you can build the second iteration of a product. What happens if you're basing your product based on feedback? You tend to avoid underused functionality. Okay, so if you look at this ROI for agile projects, because you have launched it early to the market, you tend to get money early, right? As you can see here, the business value accumulation is faster. If you look at this waterfall projects, in the waterfall projects, if you're delivering something after a year, chances are, because it's so fast changing market, chances are that the market would have shifted or customer would have vanished. So even if you're anticipating to make a big money, chances are that you'd make no money, right? Because if the market has shifted, right? So that is the advantage of delivering in small increments versus delivering in a monolithic fashion after 8 months or 10 months, right? So that is one big thing when we use agile versus when you use a waterfall to manage your project. So in agile, we always prioritize and reprioritize our needs, our features, right? So you tend to deliver faster because you're very closer to your customer. Now, if you have been a part of agile team, let me tell you there are 3 roles in the agile team. One is called the Scrum Master, who's like a traditional project manager, but this Scrum Master brings servant leadership to the team, more of a serving kind of a role. The second role is the VTF, also called the product owner. That person drives the features that will be built into the product. And the third role is the cross-functional delivery team. It's a cross-functional, everyone in that team who will execute on that product or application or the solution. It will consist of architect, business analyst, UI UX developer, a legal team member if it is a highly compliant product. Maybe you have a Python developer, Java developer, database developer, everyone required to execute. So the 3 roles in Agile team, very, very, very clear. Scrum Master, who is the face of the team, product owner, who is the face of the business, and then you have a cross-functional delivery team. Okay, so you involve your customer early, and how do you involve your customer? Through the product owner. Features which are of low value, they're not built. So we always do a differentiation between what is must-have and nice-to-have, and therefore every sprint, in Agile we deliver in small sprints, right? 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on what the team agrees to have as the size of the sprint. You start every sprint with a planning session, and in that planning session you determine what features are we going to build, and those features are high value features. Low value features we don't build into the system, and then you have the incremental return, right? You can roll it out early to the market. Okay, let's look at another value proposition: speed to market. Today the first mover advantage still holds the first mover advantage. Even if you're not a first mover to the market, you got to be a second mover, and if you're a second mover, you got to be a fast second mover. Let me ask you a question: how many of you have a Facebook account today? Please go ahead and type. Okay, okay. And how many of you have a Google Plus account? How many of you have a Google Plus account? You can speak up. You can type. I see no one. Well, that is one example of the second mover and the first mover advantage. So if you're a first mover, you retain that advantage. Even if I have a Google Plus account, but I'm more active in my Facebook because I got used to that earlier as compared to Google Plus. So therefore, it is very important. The time to market is very, very important when you are doing a new product development. Are you going to be earlier in the game or later in the game? Are you moving ahead of the competition or are you trailing competition? So time to market. If you look at Agile projects versus waterfall projects, in Agile we deliver our solution incrementally. So say if I'm building a smartphone, and in today's market I cannot have a year-long product development life cycle, right? If there was a company that we worked with, they were making truckers GPS. I can't tell you the name of the company. We asked, what is your product development life cycle? And they mentioned it's year-long. And we wondered, how can you have a year-long product development life cycle if the shelf life of products are decreasing constantly, right? Products are getting obsolete faster today. Products are getting adopted also faster today compared to what we have seen in the past. So what we do in Agile is you deliver solution incrementally. So what we did with that customer who had a year-long product life cycle, product development life cycle, we got the business and the IT together. We planned for next 6 months. Next 6 months, what we're going to deliver in next 6 months. We had a product strategy, product roadmap, and then we planned for 7 sprints, 6 to 7 sprints at a time. Believe me, they delivered their first release of Truckers GPS after 6 months. That means they cut their cycle time by 50%. So when they cut the cycle time, not only they released it early to the market for the truckers to get the feedback, that was a great advantage, but also they could make money early, right? So when you roll it out early, you get feedback early, and then you can adapt your product early. Second one, you have, so in Agile, is a methodology that consists of several methodologies, right? XP is a very popular methodology. Some of the practices in XP helps you improve quality. For example, the design technique is more evolutionary design. You refactor. So when you're writing your code, you're constantly refactoring it to make it, fortified with your test. You want to make it easy to read so that you can collectively as a team own the code. You have coding standards, pair programming, stuff like that. When you write when you have small requirements, when you're writing a small code, you tend to be more adaptable as versus when you have a big upfront requirement, when you do big upfront design, when you do big upfront development, so on and so forth. Okay. Let's look at defects. So usually in a linear cycle, you do your requirement, then you do design, development, and then in the end you do the testing, and all the ugly issues raise their head late in the game. Here in Agile, when you develop in small increments, you're doing development and testing at the same time, right? You're testing small, you're developing small, you're testing small, right? So chances are whatever you deliver to your customer is of much better quality. Even if it is not of a much better quality, you find defects early and you fix defects early. Okay. Lower cost, yes, it definitely helps in lower cost. If you are failing after a year versus if you're failing after 3 months, which one will have lower cost? Sunk cost. If you're failing on a product or a project, and if you fail after a year versus if you fail after 3 months, in which scenario do you have a lower sunk cost? 3 months, right? Fail early, right? When you fail early, you reduce your sunk cost. So why do you have lower costs? There are several factors why Agile helps you in lowering your costs. First of all, we put our emphasis on working software instead of documentation. We do documentation, but we do only meaningful documentation. Handoffs, we tend to get the teams co-located. Even if it's a distributed team, we tend to get them collaborate more using some collaboration tools like WebEx, and there are a host of others. So you try to reduce handoff. It's a cross-functional team. All the functional different functional team members, they are working together. And the change control process, absolutely, you don't have to take the changes coming from the requirement from the customer to a change control board, and then you do all the analysis, and then by the time the importance of change has vanished for the customer. In Agile, because of the frequent touch point, frequent collaboration with the customer, you listen to your customer early and you make the course correction early, right? Let's look at another lower cost. You do early testing. When you do early testing, you find defects early, you fix them early, and everyone is involved in testing process in Agile. It's a cross-functional team. So the development team member not only does development, but also does testing. On the other hand, the testing, I have seen some teams, I can give you several examples, where the testing gets into development as well. And the reason you want to have a cross-functional team is not only to lower the cost, but also to avoid a single point of failure, right? And just in time. When you are doing a just in time, you're looking at the requirements, you're prioritizing the requirements, you're not going to pack anything into the product, which is a lower value item, okay? Now, so far as risk is concerned, you have very high risk for any project, whether it's a waterfall or Agile. But then because of the frequent touch points, because of the collaboration, because of the customer engagement, you tend to minimize or mitigate your risk faster as compared to waterfall projects. Delivering faster means you're failing faster if your product or solution does not resonate with the customer. Because you're taking what you're developing to the customer early on in the game, like after every sprint, you do a demo for your customer, right? The whole goal of demo is show what you have developed so that the customer knows what they're looking for and get their feedback so that you can take that feedback in the next sprint. So the faster feedback loop, you reduce the risk. Also, you reduce the risk by not promising too much. You promise only what you can see, right? So we don't plan for a year, right? We plan for next 3 months. We don't plan for 100 features. We plan for maybe 10 features, right? So you tend to be more accurate, more precise, and of course, less risk. The assumptions, you tend to minimize assumptions because we always deliver a smaller number of features. You don't look that far. When you don't look that far, you don't make that many assumptions. And most of the risk on any project will come from assumptions, right? Look at risk, how it behaves, the two graphs. In Agile, the risk, as you can see, is sloping down, is coming down and down. One of the biggest reasons why risk is mitigated and risk is inbuilt in Agile is because of the touch points. There are many touch points, and therefore you figure out your risk early. Whatever the risk could be, it could be either a business risk, or it could be a social risk, it could be technology risk, it could be a schedule, scope, quality risk. You figure that out early. It's like, it's lower the water and expose the rock. Because of lower visibility in the waterfall projects, the risk starts at very high, and they continue to be very high because the visibility is very low, the customer engagement is very low, the business engagement is very low, and then all the ugly issues will raise their head later in the game. So this is what you find. The risk is constantly mitigated and becomes lower and lower in Agile projects as compared to waterfall projects. Okay, let's look at quality. Now, because your testing is small, you tend to find a smaller number of defects. When you catch defect early, you fix that defect early, and because it's a cross-functional team where both the development team member and the testing team member, the QA team member is participating and working collaboratively, you tend to produce higher quality product, right? And also, instead of integrating late in the game, you're integrating your code frequently, right? So when you integrate frequently, you get your feedback early, either in terms of something working or something not working. If it's not working, you fix it early, right? So you tend to have higher quality. And then again, as I mentioned, we follow a lot of good practices coming from XP and Agile, like evolutionary design technique, pair programming where two people are working together, like a navigator and driver, ping pong, the several pair programming techniques. I have used that very, very effectively with my team members, right? Refactoring, sometimes there's something called technical debt on a project, right? So you got to slow down to speed up. So you have to ask for some capacity from the product owner to make sure the development team is getting rid of the technical debt, right? And then if you look at your customer satisfaction, I will give an example of a company. So this company, it is a mapping company in Chicago. They have the top 10 automobile customers, right? And what we did was we used to interact with the customer every 6 months. We changed the model. We made a paradigm shift. Let's work with the customer to develop the features that we're developing. They were looking for some features that was 6 months. I mean, we didn't have the capability to do that. So we either had to develop that capability in-house, or we had to do some merger or acquisition, whatever it is. Those options were on the table. But because we engaged that customer early and continuously, we built a trust capital with the customer, and the customer, instead of migrating to a competition who already had those features or capabilities, they continued to stay with us and give us a chance so that we can meet their requirement. So that is what happens when you engage your customer. You build a credibility, and then with that credibility you can buy some time, still to retain the customer and deliver what they're looking for in the future, right? So we were measuring our customer satisfaction using a Net Promoter Score. I don't know how many of you know about the Net Promoter Score, but definitely I would encourage you to go and Google it. NPS. This is being widely used as a survey technique. It's a one simple question: how likely is it that you're going to recommend our product to your friends and family? One simple question. And then they find who are those negative customers, who are neutral customers, and who are promoter customers, right? And then they base their future strategy based on their outcome. So customer satisfaction, we have seen tremendous increase in customer satisfaction just because they're engaged early and they're engaged continuously. Okay. Then you find customers receive more of what they most want, but are unable to articulate. Most of the time, you'll find, especially with a web application or mobile application, very difficult for the customer to define the user interface or maybe the functionality sometimes. So they will expect the development team to show them something. But if I show them something after 8 months, I mean, we're not going to get a feedback, right? It's too late, or the customer would have vanished. But if I take it after 3 weeks or 2 weeks, that is called a sprint, chances are they will look at it and they will provide some meaningful feedback that we can incorporate for the next sprint. So you build one layer at a time based on aligning what you're developing with the mind of the customer. Okay. And then you find, we have higher customer satisfaction because they're engaged using the demos. So as I mentioned earlier, Agile is all about 3 things: develop in small increments, do frequent demo so that you can get the feedback early. Right. Okay, and visibility. Now, I think the graph is very, very clear. I don't have to talk a lot. But even Agile projects, because of so many touch points, right? You start your sprint with planning session, then you do a daily touch point, then you do the demo with your customer, and then you do a retrospective where you slow down to speed up. So all these touch points tend to increase visibility. Visibility not only about good things going on the project, but also things that are not going well. Risk, issues, dependencies, personality conflict, stakeholder conflict, requirement conflict, everything becomes visible early. If you look at waterfall project, initially the visibility is very high, very, very high. And then as you can see here, it tapers down and then it becomes a black box. Everyone assumes the product is going very well. And then in the end, all the ugly issues will raise their head. When you do a monolithic integration of the code is not working, it is not integrating well, and there are defects, then you tend to put more QA team member, you put more process, you do more symptomatic analysis instead of doing root cause analysis. Everybody's in reactive mode, right? Because the date has been promised to the customer and we have to release that, right? So this is the waterfall project, visibility on the waterfall project. So shorter site time cycles, the shorter release cycles, and the frequent demo, it tends to increase visibility. And there's a continuous business involvement, right? So you're not making a lot of assumptions. We use a lot of information radiators on Agile projects. A lot of information radiators, like Jira, it's a key information radiator. You always look at your charts, like your velocity chart. I'm not going to do a deep dive on velocity, but it's the way you measure the capacity of the team, right? How is the velocity increasing? You always measure your risk burndown chart. Is the risk decreasing or increasing? You measure some of the quality indicators on your team, like you have your code coverage, right? Is the code coverage increasing or decreasing? Things like that. You radiate those meaningful information in a very, very easy way. Unlike in waterfall, you have a lot of complex charting. Reports are put on a SharePoint, and people have to, it is all the information is pushed, and a lot of information is outdated. In Agile, they are very simple, they're updated, easy to access, both available by push and pull. Okay, and lastly, if you look at the customer employee satisfaction, I believe Agile, based on my experience coming from different industry, different companies, Agile that has taken roots are those companies where the employees are empowered, where the team is empowered, right? An empowered team meaning if the team is allowed to make the decision, the individuals in the team are allowed to make decisions, and the failure is considered as a learning opportunity, is like failing forward. Those teams, with those empowered teams, they take the ownership and they also take the accountability. At the same time, I have done an NPS, Net Promoter Score, on the team as well, transitioning from waterfall to agile. I can tell you, uh, with one of the companies, I cannot name the company, we did an NPS when we got a group of people from different floors into one co-located space. We did an NPS, and the NPS was like 5%. It's like employees are frustrated; they're on the brink of leaving the organization. We did another NPS after 3 months. Um, and we saw around 30% improvement. We did another NPS after a year. We saw 80% improvement in the NPS. People were more satisfied because of the collaboration, because of being empowered to make decisions, because they're knowing what they're developing, the big picture, and so on and so forth. So let's look at some of the characteristics. What drives the employee satisfaction? Number one, autonomy, right? You're given the task, you're given the challenge, but you're trusted that you'll be overcoming the challenge. So the ATF, the Agile Team Facilitator, also called the Scrum Master, also called the Agile Project Manager, they help drive empowerment in the team, autonomy in the team. Also, you'll see because most of the time, people who make decisions are very away from the work. People who are closer to work, they tend to they are likely, or they tend to make more effective decisions, right? So I have seen some of the architectural decisions, instead of being imposed by the manager, if an architect working with the development team, they come up with architecture or design that is more likely to be successful, that is more likely to be bought in, right? Also, most of the time, if I am an agile project manager, I'm spending time finding out what are the development needs of the team members. Sometimes I have seen there are a couple of people in the team who have never gone through agile training. So they don't understand, why do we do the daily touch point? Why do we do retrospective? Why do we demo? What are user stories? So I'll get them to agile training. It is very, very important. I mean, I can tell you, if you are going through an agile transformation, and if your team members are not trained on Agile, your Scrum Master is not trained on Agile, or your product owner is not trained on Agile, some of the stakeholders are not trained on Agile, it's not going to take roots. I have examples of so many companies which have failed, or which have done a reset because they have not done it the right way. So making sure everyone is trained on Agile, they understand the basics of Agile, the different levels of training as well. And also sometimes I also find opportunities where the team member needs some training on different skills, like a Java developer. That person is a very junior level skills. That person needs to have more training on Java or Python. He's just a beginner, but you need more training on Python to be more advanced skills. So as an agile project manager, or as a product owner, you got to identify those areas where you want the teams to improve or to grow, right? So skills are developed. Most of the time, I ask the development team members, hey, what is your path for development? What is the next goal? And sometimes the team members tell us that, hey, do you know what? I want to be a Scrum Master. Well, if as for a Scrum Master, I work with him or her to lay a roadmap and work with that person. Sometimes the team members express the desire that my goal is to become a product owner, because I'm very good with features, prioritizing the features, and I'm very conversant with trends going on in a specific domain, like a cloud project. I know what the trends. So I want to be a product owner. So the product owner lays out a roadmap with the team to figure out how they can develop those capabilities. So in Agile, we focus on developing people, because we believe that when you develop those people, they're more empowered, they're more effective, and eventually you'll find better products with better quality and a satisfied customer. Okay, so I think that's pretty much I wanted to talk to you about Agile. I do hear some questions. Um, okay, so I do see some questions. I think not familiar with XP. XP is an engineering programming, and I think it's very popular when it comes to quality practices like pair programming and continuous integration. I can send you a name of a book, RG, um, and yes, I can send you some links where you can learn about continuous integration and good XP practices, definitely. And I think there is a training as well that comes from WebAge on DevOps, and that addresses this aspect of it, definitely. Any other question? I see Victoria on the call as well. Victoria, I mean, anything that you have at your end, Victoria? Alex? Okay, so great. So I think with this we are done. But definitely, if you have any questions, I can work with you one-on-one, or if there is anything that I can help you with, either it's a books, certification, what is the next step. But I can tell you the trend is very, very clear. More and more companies, more and more projects across private and public are going agile. Internationally, I was in China. I think more and more projects are done using agile in China. I was in Europe. I saw France. I saw Amsterdam. I saw Ireland. Most of these companies are going the agile road. Most of the customers are requiring that projects be managed using agile. Okay, good. If there is no more question, thank you very much for everyone for being a part of this training hosted by WebAge, and looking forward to have more trainings. If you have some specific topics in mind, reach out to us. We can address this topic in a similar webinar. Thank you, everyone.